Hello and welcome once again to the How Long to Beat podcast. I'm Rick, as always. We also have Paula and Alex.
Hello.
And for the first time in what feels like a long time, we have all, in the spirit of this podcast, beaten games. Can we get a little round of applause for everybody?
He's trying to find the. Yeah, there it is.
Frantically scrambling.
He's like watching you, going, where is it again? There you go.
Tried.
So, as well as completions, we have, as always, got some retirements, some currently playings, and this week, slightly topically, we'll come to it as we go. We're going to be talking about revisiting games from our childhood and the goods and the bads and the uglies and all the permutations therein. And then we're going to finish off with the one of the last installments of this season's edition of How Long to Beat The Game. And let's jump in and get started with a rare Paula completion. Tell us more.
I checked, and it's been like a month since I last completed anything. So
Yeah.
this is a motive for celebration right now. So I finished Terra, which, by the way, was one of my I guess my boxes of loot from the Steam game sale. And in this game, you kind of have to. Wait, this is actually a game I've talked about previously because it was on a Steam Next Fest or something like among those lines. And you have to kind of like I'm trying to find the word for it because my brain is not working. But you have to kind of rebuild the environment on pretty much that planet at this point. That is kind of like a barren land that is utterly polluted, both the land and the water. So you have to use machinery to purify the earth, purify the water, and then bring life back to the barren land. And it kind of like plays like a mixture of almost like a puzzle game in a sense, because you have to be careful on what you place first and what you place next, because you have these, I'm gonna call it like leaves or life, because the little icon for it is a pile of leaves that are kind of like floating in the wind. And you use this resource to build your buildings, or place your buildings, and then you use them to. No, that's pretty much what you use them for. And you have to also, at some point of the game, to scout for the animals to inhabit this newly flourished land. And then you have to clean up everything and go home. So the game goes like this. First is the detox stage. Then it's kind of like the time to get some vegetation here stage. And then you place the animals and pack everything up and recycle all your buildings and go to the next area. Or in the case of the last area, go out to outer space, because you already finished reviving this planet. And it was a very relaxing little adventure. It took me almost 5 hours to beat it, which is right on point with the How Long to Beat estimate for the main story only. And there seems to be a bunch of areas that unlock after you beat the main story of the game and you build your rocket and get the hell out of there. But I was kind of like happy with the experience so far. And I was like, hey, I'm not gonna let it overstay its welcome. I'm kind of done with this, so I finished it. And you can also go to like extra completion and try to get like every single species of animal and try to get like the special achievements that are hidden. There are 5 of them. And I think I got one, but I don't remember which one. if I check real quick, is the Antarctic Oasis achievement. And it says restore the volcanic glacier while still having at least 15 lava tiles. So yeah, you have like a swamp to restore. You have like a mountainous region to restore. Archipelago. And finally you have, and this is kind of like at the same time the coolest one, but also it is kind of like the most tedious one. Kind of like sunken city, or like that some shit clearly went down there, and then you realize why it is no longer inhabited by anyone, because once you excavate it enough, there's a nuclear breakout and you have to neutralize the radiation.
Well, shit.
Which was kind of cool, not gonna lie. It was kind of tedious, but still cool. And yeah, that is Terra. I totally recommend it, especially since it's on sale. For anyone who just wants to experience those 5 hours of story, the actual asking price might be a little too much, but in my opinion, since I bought it on sale, it was just right.
And it's worth saying, like, anyone who's got a Netflix account, the mobile version of this game is free with your subscription. Oh. I know because I've downloaded it. I haven't tried it yet, but I have downloaded it. Yeah, and also if anyone wants to sort of see some footage, sort of contextualize what Paula said, there's a channel called First Five on YouTube. They specifically review shorter games, and Terra was one of the games that they featured in their most recent video. So yeah, and actually on the subject of Steam sales, what did we all get, if anything, in those sales?
I'm proud of myself. Nothing.
But what? I got at least
the sale isn't finished yet.
Quiet you.
I have to say I've skipped the past few, but I did get a few games this time. I probably won't list them out because it's a bit tedious, and also I expect I'll be playing a few of them in the next few weeks anyway. Yeah. Was Terra the only thing you got, Paula, or did you get a few others?
I actually got like 6 games. Yeah.
Oh damn.
I got, and this is out of like pure memory, is Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy.
Oh, you
and
poor
I got
thing. Why would you do that?
Yeah, I know. I played it before, but I want to try to complete it. And then Blue Fire.
Okay.
And this one, I for the next one, it is Aaron's fault. Let's keep it at that. It's Needy Streamer Overload. That is kind of like, I'm gonna say a chat game, but you manage a streamer. But it also seems to have like some horror elements, and I'm like, cool. Okay. For the price, my interest was big enough. The other one is Tangled Tower, Terra, and The Wandering Village.
Tangled Tower, I feel like me and Alex both wholeheartedly endorse.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah.
Well, my only complaint with that game is not enough. I want more.
Why don't I jump in at this point then? Sure. I've got 2 games that I've beaten. The first of those is the co-op game JYDGE that me and my brother have been picking away at for the last few weeks. We finished the campaign. We haven't played every level on all of the available difficulties. And I was slightly surprised to find out that it turns out there is a 4th hardest difficulty that unlocks once you complete the campaign. Now that, I think, is probably pushing it a little bit. I expect we'll probably finish all the levels on the initial 3 difficulties. That 4th one, possibly not. The core game is fun. The core game is good enough to sustain it over the 5 or 6 hours that it takes to see it. I think the fact that it works so seamlessly in co-op is a big plus for it. I'm not sure if I would be as positive about it if I'd played the whole thing through solo, particularly as you start taking on some of the more challenging mission objectives. There's a degree of strategizing and planning around both your loadout and also strategies. And I'm not sure, because I haven't played any of this game single player, if some of the enemy placements change or increase in line with the number of players you've got going. But the challenge almost always felt appropriate in the time that we spent with the game. as I gather, it's not necessarily 10 Tons' best top-down shooter. When you look at reviews and things, there's a couple of other games in their catalogue that fans seem to like a little bit more. But on the whole, I can say I had a good time with this one. It did what I wanted it to. The story was a bit of a joke, but this isn't what this kind of game is there for. I thoroughly enjoyed the gameplay, and that is all I needed to enjoy. Conversely, my second completion, and again, I shouted out at the back end of last week, is a game called The Bookwalker. So I played a demo of this one. I got very excited. I bought it on release, and then I opened Game Pass for something unrelated and realized it's on there for free. Now, I don't mind too much because it's not an expensive game. I got it on a relatively healthy sale because there's a bundle on Steam with their previous game, The Final Station. And because I already had that in my library, it worked out that I got like 30% off the game at launch. Don't mind paying that. Don't mind supporting a dev. And this game is really, really cool. So the concept is, in case I didn't go over it last week, I honestly don't remember. You are a writer in a futuristic world where some kind of calamity's happened and people can't just imagine and write new things down anymore. It's a painstaking exercise. Writing is a very particular profession. From a skill set standpoint beyond what we understand in our world. And you have been shackled. You're not allowed to write for 30 years. So you agree to undertake some black market work in order to have those people remove your shackles early. And you become what's called a bookwalker. So you dive into the worlds of these books, retrieving items for your client. And that involves, for example, going into a story about an alchemist who's created an eternal life potion and retrieving said potion. The game is split into two parts. The books themselves are an isometric CRPG style affair with a heavy emphasis on fetch questing, dialogue choices, light puzzle solving, with some combat in there. And those sections are interspersed by first-person sort of walking sim bits, very, very brief interludes in that style, set in your apartment and in the immediate vicinity of your apartment. Now, right out the gate, the combat is completely paper-thin, if you'll pardon the pun. There are no consequences to failing the combat. You spawn at the start of the book again, and the enemies have lost exactly as much health as they had when you died. There isn't any particular difficulty. The enemies themselves have very, very limited combat patterns. I think you can probably count on two hands the amount of battles that you face throughout the entirety of the game. Which is almost worse than if the combat... Well, I suppose it almost would have been worse if the combat was good, because then it'd be a case of, well, you almost never get to engage with it. In a way, it becomes a positive that it's so little featured in it. But then you sort of wonder, well, why did
why is
you
it there in
bother?
the first place?
Yeah, I think this game could have absolutely gotten away without it. I don't think it needed it. The important thing is the story underneath is thoroughly compelling. I was totally invested in this world, in the characters, in the relationship with Etienne, the main character, and his sidekick, Roderick. There are a few twists towards the end. The big one is sort of glaringly obvious, but there are a few smaller ones that caught me out. And I think even having a rough idea of where this story is going to go doesn't diminish the tale it tells or the worlds it builds. It's such a fascinating situation because you have these layers of story worlds within this overarching world, similar to our own, but different in many fundamental ways. And it's masterfully told. There's definitely been a big improvement in the work of the team translating, because there were a couple of funky sentences in the final station in their previous game. I would never have known this wasn't written by a native English speaker, assuming it wasn't. But the point is the studio stepped up their writing game, and it's critical they did. and the game is absolutely the better for it. I actually think you both get a massive kick out of this.
Sounds like
I'm pretty sure. It doesn't sound like a you kind of game.
What? I said it sounds like a me kind of game.
Oh,
Sorry.
I thought you said it doesn't. I was like,
no. It sounds exactly like a me kind of game.
Who are you again?
Yeah. Who is this man?
It's short. It's on Game Pass. I'm pretty sure the Steam release is deck verified if you do want to throw him some dollar. Really, really good. And I think this is the kind of game in the AA space that we absolutely should be encouraging, because it has no peers. There is nothing quite like it on the market in any capacity. Is it deck verified?
I'm sure even if it isn't, it's most games, even when they're not verified. I've yet to play a game that doesn't work.
Well, it says full controller support, and it has to be said, a Steam Deck probably has more power under the hood than my laptop. And my laptop ran this game comfortably with no problems. So I have no reason to expect that it wouldn't run on a deck. But it's well worth a look. And I think even if the concept doesn't sound, for anyone listening, like what you would normally go for, I think this is the kind of game that can change your perspective on narratives in games, and how that plays out and how those things move around. So thoroughly happy with this one. Wholeheartedly recommend it.
So I'm looking at the page for the game. It says developed by Do My Best in all
That's
caps.
the name of the studio. Yep.
I love it.
It's quite wholesome. I like it.
They're just doing their best.
Well, their best was very, very good as far as I'm concerned. Do you want to jump out?
Me turn.
I don't really have anything else on that one. Me turn. 3 guesses which one of us teaches English for a living.
Me. Yeah. I'm on summer break. I don't want to think about English for another 2 months, please. So I beat 2 games this week. I'll start with I'll just start with the.
How many games did you beat? Sorry.
I beat 2 games. Thank you. Should be very proud of me. I beat Growing Up, which, yeah, it was fine. So I've talked about this game a lot already. It's the one that feels like it should be a scam, but isn't. So I have a few critiques of this game, but they're not like, I don't really think they're unique to this game. You know what I mean? Like the few sort of critiques I have, it's not like this game is the sole, arbiter of these issues and is like, unique in this problem. But, it's a narrative game about obviously growing up, where when you graduate high school, the game's kind of over, right? And it'll give you a little bit of like, this is what happens to you and some of your friends, et cetera, et cetera. It was in the LGBTQ plus bundle, because I think theoretically you can have same-sex relationships. But I'll say from the go here, I played as because it lets you just sort of randomize like what gender. It's still going to do 2 genders, right? Like there's no real variance there. And it'll randomize what you look like as well if you want, like who your parents are and all that stuff. You can choose if you'd like, but you can just random. So I just went random and I was a girl. It never gave me a single chance to romance any women. Like no women were even presented to me. Which I was like, what the fuck? Because I think it's super randomized. And I think the problem is that in this game, what they'll do is they will present you with an individual. And I think this is part of the issue with gamifying this like concept of growing up, is that I think unless you unequivocally are like a complete fucking asshole to the person they present you to, they will just assume you would like to see this character's story play out. And we're just going to not show you any other character stories, which is kind of like, feels sort of like shit. It's like, what, am I supposed to just like shop around and just be a complete fucking dick to a bunch of people? Like, why can't you just show me multiple individuals? Like, why do I have to lock out one? It's a game about fucking growing up. If you have a ton of people, why don't you just show me a bunch of them? Like, allow me to explore a ton of friends and a ton of stories like that. Because ultimately I ended up meeting like 3 people in this growing up game. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This character meets 3 people. It's like basically 1 per phase, right? Like elementary phase, middle, and then high school. And you're like, that seems so weird. Like, why do I only get to meet 1 person? And my character couldn't go through her by life. It's not fair. So anyway, that was like one little critique that I had, where it's like that doesn't feel very like realistic in terms of like a in terms of the game. Second problem, and this is the thing that I feel like is a critique, a larger critique of these types of narrative games, and of a lot of sort of not like choose your own adventure necessarily, but like romanceable games, where I find in almost all of these sort of romance style games, or even friendship style games, the way that they portray these relationships that you have is that you meet an individual who has some kind of issue, right? Like there's a problem in their life and they're dealing with something. And you are in so many ways like their savior, right? Like you solve something for them. And I saw this actually when we were playing the Otome games. Like I feel like I see this a lot in there too, where it's like you in some way are this like hero to them emotionally. And it's really fucking gross. Like it's really bad and like kind of fucked up, because like, for instance, the character that I end up like getting into a romance with, who's like a cool character or whatever, he's like this, he's like the troubled dude, right? He's like parents going through and forth, and like he's at a hard time, and he writes poetry, but he doesn't want to show it, like that kind of guy, right? And then eventually he becomes a vet, which I was just like, oh my god, this is like, I'm like, it's fine, like I get it, like there's fantasies and stuff, like whatever. Like if you want to have a fantasy of like, getting with the sensitive veterinarian, like that's fine. Like I actually have no issue with that concept, right? Like that part of it, I was like, that's fun, right? Get some tail, have some fun. Oh, that's funny. I like that. But like the problem is that the way, instead of just maybe having an organic relationship where like you just kind of help them, or like you're just sort of their support at times, and you kind of develop this like friendship that develops into a romance, it becomes this thing where like they treat you as if you are the individual who like solved all of their problems that they had with their parents. And it's like, I would have never been the same without you. Like, it's like this really like insane codependence that the characters put forth, and that all the characters put forth. Like everyone you meet has some kind of weird codependency with you that will either not function. Like there's this one kid that you meet who has like a pretty tragic story. He's like this, like he's into music and stuff. And then he gets like, let's say slight trigger warnings for anyone dealing with sexual assault and stuff, but essentially nothing specific. But basically this character describes a moment at like a summer camp where like an older female counselor seems to have like sexually assaulted this kid, right? Which you're like, oh shit, okay, we're dealing with this now. But like they develop this like feeling for you, but then they can't handle the idea of touch or anything, and so they kind of sort of vanish from your life, which I was like, that's pretty intense. But it seemed like there was only like two ways the story was going to go, essentially, where it's like you either entirely push them away anyway, or like you like save this person. And I was like, well, this makes no sense. Like I can't help this individual in that way. And so it goes either like they just like leave you forever, or you like save them and help them get over this thing. Which again, both of these things is just like, I'm like, this is a little kind of fucked up, in a lot of ways. Like we're just playing off these like intense emotional things as like, anyway, it didn't sit right with me. And again, I don't think this game is unique in this, because I think where it comes from is that like when you're playing these role-playing games, I think they're thinking like, well, you should be the hero, right? Like you're the protagonist of this game, so like you should have those. But it's like, is that really what you're coming for in a game about growing up? It's like, I thought the point of this is that you're growing up and you're going through the challenges, and like sometimes you don't have answers for things. And honestly, you might sometimes be the dick, and you also maybe aren't a hero, and because you're not, because you're just a fucking person, right? And you're just growing up. And yet it all seems to go to like all the like the logical conclusions end in these like, you saved this person. Like there's like one like I got stuck in this fucking story with this football dude, which I tried to be mean to him, but it seemed to make him like me more, which I was like, god damn it. I'm like, maybe that's slightly realistic.
No kink shame, Alex. No kink shame in here.
Yeah, that's fine. But also I'm like, but then I was thinking like game wise, I was like, well, how the fuck do I make this asshole leave me alone? Like, are you just gonna make me go through this story? Which one, if there were more stories, I'd actually be totally fine with that, because that's kind of how, the growing up works, right? Like if that, you know what I mean? Like if it was like I'm being presented with a bunch of people and there's this one guy I can't seem to kind of get away from me, and like I have to engage with this story, then that's okay. But I knew that this was like, no. If you engage with this, this is it. Like that's all the story you're gonna get for this like high school thing. So I was like, fuck. I got stuck in that thing. So yeah, I just like, I don't know. And it's a thing I've noticed because like I feel like you get this a little bit even in like Persona games and even in like things like Mass Effect and stuff too. And it's like you become kind of the savior of your romantic partner in a lot of these games. And I guess I just like it. And I know that like they feel like there needs to be something, right? Like you need to have some sort of arc to your relationship. But like that's not
Easier
really,
to write, yeah.
yeah, it's easier to write, but that's not
Yeah.
really how relationships work, right? Like you're going to have struggles in a relationship, but you're like, you grow together. You're not like saving an individual. And if you are, that's a very like dicey circumstances, right? Because now you've got a huge power imbalance within a relationship, which is just kind of off to me. So anyway, yeah, it rubbed me the wrong way. And I was a little pissed too, because like it was in the LGBTQ plus bundle and it felt like so fucking hetero. Like this game was like so straight. They were trying to pair me off with a fucking quarterback jock. I was like, come on. Where are my 90s lesbians? Where the fuck are they? All right. I was like, give me a break here. So yeah, I was pretty disappointed in that, to be honest. I was like, how did this sneak into that bundle? And maybe it's because there's all this randomization in it. But yeah, Paula, what's up?
Yeah, I have to say that you're not wrong that there are a lot of games, especially like in the romance category, where you are kind of like a savior, or at least like
Yeah.
sometimes you're kind of like the therapist in the relationship. But
Yeah.
they're like some of my favorites are actually like more about teamwork, like Fran in Code Realize. And then you have the some Otome Twitter fan favorites like Yang from Pure Vita that is like, you don't help him, you make him worse. Like he's the same as who at the beginning of the game. And at the end
Yeah.
of the game, he doesn't change. And people love him for that.
Yeah, and like that kind of stuff is like cool, sounds fine to me. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, like, you know, obviously as an individual, we have impacts on others, right? Like that's obviously a thing. It's just like I don't need my character to be the most important person to every single character that I meet, you know? Because
Yeah.
that strikes me as extremely unrealistic. Like what you said, like that sounds cool. It'd be nice if there were characters in there who, you know, I strike up friendships with and they don't change at all. And it's not because I didn't do something for them. It's because I was never going to change that individual because I can't do that, right? Like it's like just a person. So anyway, it's fine. It's pretty like it's you know exactly how the game's going to end, right? When you start playing it, you know exactly what's going to go down. It's super cookie cutter. The writing is pretty on the nose at times. Like I would like really on the nose. They like make fun of themselves at one point because there's like a game development path you can go down, kind of. And talks about like who would want to make a game about growing up or something. Like who would do something like that mundane? And I was like, fuck you.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, yeah.
Right? Like you can only wink, wink, nudge, nudge if your game is really fucking good. You know what I'm saying? Your game's not really good. Your game is fine. So I was like, no. Don't start winking and nudging at me right now, man. I'm like, it's also like, no, the idea of playing a growing up sim is not boring. It's actually a cool idea. Like, I like your idea a lot. I think your idea is neat. I think there's a lot of great stuff in this. It's just that I don't think that the developers actually had the capacity to create a game that was unique or interesting enough for this concept. I think that perhaps I wouldn't be surprised, but perhaps if as the game was being developed, they may have realized they bit off more than they can chew, and that this is a really challenging thing to do, and that there's actually not a lot of narrative coherency in growing up. Because growing up, as we might know, yeah, when you become an adult, you might be able to create a story of what your growing up was, but growing up is a series of discrete events, right? Like to try and put a narrative on your first 18 years of life is doomed to failure because there is no narrative. You can create it later in life, but the actual experience of growing up is a series of challenges, which is actually perfect for a fucking video game, right? Like a series of discrete challenges that you deal with as you age. But this game kind of does that, kind of doesn't. I think I would be hesitant to recommend it, like based on this, but because it is so short and because it is randomized, there is actually a chance that you may enjoy it more than I did. So like, if people are listening to this and you're like, I kind of like these sort of games, like Paula, I think you would actually find some enjoyment out of this game, because I think you would probably have maybe more of a bandwidth than I do for this type of narrative. And like I said, it's not terrible and it's not bad at all. It's good. And that's where I would put it, right? It's in that sort of good area where it's like, yeah. This isn't a game that's like, ugh. It's just that, like Rick, we've talked about this too before. Like, when you play a game and you see the opportunities and you see what it could be, but it's not quite that. That's what this game is for me, where it's like, I didn't
The 8 where it feels like a 5. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Although I would probably argue this is more in the 7 range. Like it's in that sort of good, but I know exactly what you mean, right? Yeah. It could have been so much better, but not quite. Anyway, that's growing up. Again, don't really regret it. It was like 2-3 hours, right? Like, or maybe 3 hours. Yeah, like fuck it, right? I have wasted 3 hours on far worse things. But something that I didn't waste my time.
No, I'm gonna. Sorry, it was a bad joke anyway. I'll leave it.
That's fair.
Whenever Rick thinks it's about a joke, it has to be.
Oh, geez. Throwing Rick right under the bus there. So
can't say shit either.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, Rick's
you're not wrong.
It's like,
I'm gonna like to stand on.
Call a spade a spade. I also beat Cult of the Lamb, and this one was excellent. I do think. I think some people have talked about, it slightly has the roguelite problem of, and a lot of games problems, where by the end of the game, you have figured out the system so well that there's not really much of a challenge. Which, like, I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. Like, because I can't really complain because basically I was rewarded for playing the game. So I don't have that, like, I can't complain too much. Like, I beat the final boss, like, fairly easily. That being said, they definitely open it up to, like, a new game plus and, like, far more challenge afterwards if you would like. But, yeah, I don't know. I just had fun. It's like, there is a point, though, I will say, and I do think you can max out sort of what you need pretty quickly. And there are some systems within the game that they mention that you could encounter that I just never really seemed to have encountered. And that might just be because they actually give you a lot of tools to handle different things. Like, for example, you can theoretically have, and just in case people don't remember what this game is about, you're running this cult. You're basically trying to kill all these, like, heretics, essentially. And so it's like slightly Animal Crossing, like village, although more like a survival sim part of it.
It's a bit like Don't Starve.
Yes, that's
visually as well.
Yes, Don't Starve. It's like Don't Starve if Don't Starve had like a dungeon crawling aspect to it, roguelike dungeon crawling. Which I know Don't Starve I think has some combat, but I think it's just survival oriented combat. I don't actually know. I haven't really played the game. So if I'm wrong, sorry. But for instance, you're supposed to be able to have like dissidents, right? Like people who like start to not believe in you and start to like revolt. So you can have these like prisons and stuff. But like I never even unlocked the prison thing because it never was an issue. I think twice I had dissidents and I just killed them because you can make your cult into sacrifice. So I was like, okay. Murder the non-believer, right? And so it was like, wasn't even like partially an issue, which I felt like it was supposed to be a bit more of an issue, but it really wasn't. So like pretty quickly, you could everything just sort of gets automated in your village, which is great. But I guess the thing that maybe left me a little like, about it was, it feels like they maybe were cognizant of the fact that maybe some people don't want to do the survival stuff. So they actually built in a lot of ways to sort of automate that. But in some ways, it slightly undercuts that survival element where you don't actually really have to engage with it or think about it too much, which is fine, I suppose, but does make you sort of feel a little bit like, okay, why is it there then, right? Like if it's not, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I feel a little like, I'm like a little unsure of some of those elements. And maybe it's just because I love that stuff so much that I sort of maxed it out really quick and I was like really into it. And I'm like, I love it. And like, don't get me wrong, it's very satisfying. And like building your little cult is fun. Um, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of decorations too, which I did not engage with really at all. But I can imagine there's probably some pretty fucking creative cults out there because they give you lots of shit you can build. It's just that a lot of it costs resources that like ultimately could be used for more practical things. So there's not really any reason to deck your cult out, you know, like unless you want to go dungeon diving a lot, which there's also not a lot of reasons to go dungeon diving again. Also because all the side quest stuff is designed to unlock cloaks that you wear that give you special bonuses. But the problem is that there's really only one cloak worth anything. And it's so much better than all the other cloaks that once I got it, which wasn't hard, because you only need to complete 4 steps of a side quest, and there's a ton of them. So I was like, not a ton, but there's like 16 or 20, right? You know what I mean? There's a lot. So I got it really fast, and then I was like, well, what? I don't need any of those cloaks. Because basically, let me put it this way. When you go diving, you get these things called relics. They're cards, and they're always good bonuses. Like sometimes your attack speed might go up 1.25. Maybe you'll get an extra heart. There could be even crazier ones. Like some of them, if you roll, you damage people. There's one that like straight up brings you back to life. After like really good stuff. But they're hidden throughout the dungeons that you're going through. And like you'll find a room and it'll have a guy and he'll offer you like a choice of them. But one of the cloaks gives you 4 random relics at the start of every run, and then you can't find any more in the dungeons. But the thing is, you rarely ever find 4 relics anyway. So the idea of just having this cloak that just auto gives you 4 fucking relics, and then you also don't have to go like scouring every dungeon to find the relics. Instead, they'll replace it with, maybe a combat room or a fucking totally different thing reward. Sorry, it's not relics. Relics are a different thing. Sorry. It's I don't remember what they're called, but it's cards. Relics are something else actually. A relic is like a special thing that's even more powerful than the cards. But just the cards. I can't remember what they're called, but they're the cards. They may be like, yeah, anyway. So like it's just like once you unlock that, I literally never used anything else because it was so powerful. I was like, fuck yeah, great, this is the one. And so it sort of made the side quests not really seem like they matter at all, which is a little unfortunate. So yeah, I mean, overall, I think Cult of the Lamb for me is like a really solid like 8.5. Like it's very, very, very good. It's very satisfying feeling. The weapons, there's a lot of there's like a fair number of weapon variety. There's like 5 different types of weapons, like axes, hammers, daggers, swords, and something else. I can't remember. Maybe it's only 4. Who knows? But amongst those, there's then also a ton of different types that you unlock as you go through. So there could be like, there's like ones that are like vampiric, where they'll suck things out. There's one that increases your devotion for like, when you get this thing called fervor, because you can cast spells. There's a whole bunch of stuff in this game. You got spells, cards, relics, weapons. One cool thing is like, you can get like what are called like godly weapons, which like deal an absurd amount of damage, like crazy higher damage. And so I unlocked that. And then when I got to the final boss, it gives you a selection of 3 weapons. And almost always one of those godly ones appeared. And I was like, okay, that one. And you fucking mince the boss so fast because I was like, stab, stab, stab. All right, dead. Stab, stab, stab. Okay, dead. And you're just like, there you go. So, yeah. If you like roguelikes at all, I super recommend it. If you like sort of dungeon crawly games and survival sort of mechanics, go to town. It's also fun because you can be a complete fucking sociopath in this game. Like, it encourages you to be the absolute worst. And that is great. So yeah, recommend it. Anyway, that's Cult of the Lamb. 2 games that actually, I had a good time with. This one better than the other, but both good. On that note, why don't one of you tell me about your retirements? How about
Well, speaking of games, sorry.
No, you go to town.
Okay, so speaking of games that I totally didn't had a good time with, is the password game, which is a browser game where you have to start typing up a password, and they give you like more and more rules on how the password has to have a certain length or certain type of characters, and then increasingly more stupid, increasingly more stupid prompts that you have to fulfill. Like, hey, in Roman numerals, the Roman numerals have to add up to 35, I think, and then they tell you, hey, the elements that are like in your password, like sodium, like the third version of the word, like
The
NA
periodic
for
table symbol, yeah.
the periodic table letters, and they tell you like the elements have to have a weight, not a weight, as something of 200 or less. No, they have to add up to 200. And then the password catches on fire and you have to redo everything you've done at that point. And then they give you a little egg, and they say, and they tell you, hey, Meatball, it is in this little egg. It hasn't hatched yet. Please take care of him. And then when it hatches, you have to feed him worms, and you have to copy and paste the emoji of worms, and you have to feed him like 3 worms every minute. And this is where everything goes downhill, because you could overfeed it. We
You're
can hear
muted,
you.
Alex.
You're muted.
Oh, god damn it. I said, this sounds like the I Think You Should Leave sketch. Have you guys seen the new season?
No, but I do know what you're
No.
talking about.
The little egg? No, oh, you gotta watch it. Listen, just you two watch I Think You Should Leave season 3. You're gonna find something that I think is literally this game you're describing, Paula.
Yeah, leave the link down, or the name of the
It's-
thing down there
I think you should
in the
leave
chat,
with.
please.
Was it Tim Robinson or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll find a link. You carry on. I'll find a link.
Thank you.
I've got it.
So you have to feed this little chicken, and this is where everything goes downhill, because while you feed the chicken, you have to look up for a link for a YouTube video with a very specific length. And then you have to do like increasingly more difficult task to make this password perfect. And the thing is, when you paste the link, you could mess up the other rules, and you have to redo the whole password while feeding the fucking chicken. So then I was just chilling, and then Paul died because I overfed him. And then he died because he starved to death because I didn't feed him enough. And then I thought I was doing a very good job because I drew like 30 something or 20 something. I don't remember, but I was like very far into the game. The fucking Paul died because of overeating again. And I'm like, hey, does this chicken have like an actual capacity? And if you feed him more than a certain amount of worms, he dies? So it is a chicken time bomb.
My favorite kind of time bomb.
Yeah. So yeah, I went insane because of this fucking chicken called Paul. Rick, take it away before I lose my marbles even more.
I'll take it off for you. So I've got 2 retirements this week. A very soft one, and a much harder one, shall we say. So the soft one, first of all. I have retired Gato Roboto. Specifically, this game has a homebrew port for Vita, which unfortunately suffers from pretty significant slowdown. So I played the opening 10 minutes. I was like, I like this game. I don't like the way it's running on my handheld. And I have 2 options. I can either fuck around trying to fix this port of a 4-hour game, or I can chalk this one up and just play it on PC, where I already own it. So that's what I've decided to do. Or at least, leave it for the time being, and maybe it's fixed by the time I come back to it. So that's that one. The game itself's great. Just and I can't believe I'm saying this, don't play it on Vita. And then the
Damn.
second, I know. And then the second retirement is a game that I actually had quite looked forward to playing, so I was quite disappointed by. And that is Sword of the Vagrant for Switch. It's also on PC and other platforms, I believe. This is a Xerox of Muramasa the Demon Blade, which is to say a poor, shallow imitation of that game. It's set up very, very similarly. It's got a similar kind of hand-drawn art style. You play a single person with a sword fighting an action combat heavy ARPG sort of setup. The problem is that the story's not engaging, at least in the first 90 minutes, which is as much as I played. The combat is insultingly dumbed down and even more insultingly like baby's first game easy. I spammed the attack button and got through all of the encounters. There is a dodge roll. I used it once and then forgot I had it. And the difficulty is you'll find a lot of people saying reasonably good things about this game. And I think they are people who played Muramasa once and are then coming to this and thinking, oh, I remember that reminds me of that game. Probably reasonable enough, and then throwing out recommendations. Unfortunately for the developers, I am bang in the middle of a playthrough of Muramasa and its DLCs, and this game just doesn't hold a candle to it in the slightest regard. Maybe things get more exciting later. Maybe they open up, but I can't bring myself to spend any more time playing this game because I know what it's trying to be. And I already have what it's trying to be. And I will happily play that game again and again and again. Sword of the Vagrant has no purpose for me. It just can't justify itself to me. So that's one that I've deleted off my Switch and probably will never reinstall. Ditto, deleted off my computer. So yeah, not a fan of that one. It's just too basic. It's just way too basic. Go and play Muramasa. And speaking of basic, you've only got one game you're currently playing, Alex.
True.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. I am currently playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Yeah, was I? Oh shit! I might have started something else actually. I'll have to double check my Steam Deck in a second because I think I maybe have actually started playing something else and I just can't remember what it was.
Something memorable.
I've been
What
thinking
a professional
about
outfit
seafood.
we are.
I think that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna go back to seafood. That's what I was gonna do.
Okay.
But I haven't yet. Because I need to play a game now. No, I did start something. I'm playing Haiku the Robot. Okay. Haiku the Robot.
Haiku.
Yeah.
How is it?
It's fun. It's good. It's super, super basic. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's very, it's like a super basic Metroidvania. But like, that's kind of all I was looking for. I just wanted something like really simple with kind of a cute art style. It is kind of neat. You collect like these like bolts, and when you get hurt, you can heal yourself using the bolts. So you like hold on RB and you can like, you mechanically fix yourself. But you also want to save those bolts because those bolts can be used for upgrades and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, it's kind of neat in that regard. It's a little confusing at times. Maybe that's also just because I wasn't like fully paying attention. I was like watching something and playing, and I'm like, I should probably pay more attention to this game, and because it is a Metroidvania, so I do have to kind of like see where things are going. Not really challenging all that much per se, but also not like absurdly easy or anything. Yeah, so I think it's fun. I'm glad I got it. It was in that bundle, that Metroidvania one. I think
Was?
Yeah, I think Tiamat. I think Tiamat said he got that one, so I recommend this one. It seems like it's going to be a quick play, though the map does look pretty big. Honestly, like looking at it, I was like, oh shit, okay, not the smallest map ever. Yeah, I also really like the art style. I think it's kind of cute and Game Boy-esque, but obviously higher fidelity than the Game Boy.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just a teeny bit. Right. So I played that, and I'm also, of course, playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor. It's so fucking good. It's so good. It's like, fuck, man. Okay, so obviously it's not like full open world per se, right? Because technically it's like a series of zones, but like each of those zones is in some sense open world, but it's more dark. Like, you know how this was sort of like Dark Souls light, right? Like Dark Souls light side,
Dark
one might
Sabers,
say.
yeah.
Yeah, there you go, Dark Sabers. I like that. In the sense that it takes inspiration from that. But I think the best inspiration it takes from it is like, man, are these levels ever fucking connected in ways that you don't even realize? Like the amount of shortcuts and things that you unlock to like get you back quickly to other areas. And then like I was playing this whole area that I thought was like totally disconnected from something. And then I turned this corner and I unlocked this door that was like locked. And I walk out to this space that I had explored before and was like, oh fuck, that's where I am. Holy shit. I'm like, I'm right in the middle of all this. And like it feels like, to use sort of funny phrase, but it feels like such big brain game design in a sense where it really feels like they were just like, yo, we're going to make the most interconnected fucking levels you have ever seen with tons of verticality. And like, you can jump all over the place and you can do all this crazy shit. And it's like fucking, it's so expertly done. And it's one of those few games where it's like, you know, like in Uncharted games, a lot of Uncharted is like the traversal. But like, let's be honest, the traversal in those games is fine, you know, but it's like not
brain dead.
Yeah, it's pretty brain dead. In this one, there's a lot of puzzling to the traversal, and it's so fluid and fun and smooth, and like there's lots of using the force to like manipulate things, again, there's a lot of these shortcuts that you unlock so that you're like, oh, interesting. And then they're very generous on the map because when you open it up, it'll indicate like, hey, you see this little yellow thing? That's an area you could have explored and you haven't done it yet. And you're like, I really should do that, shouldn't I? Yeah, I will. And then there's always some kind of fun reward there for you. And all the rewards, which this is also what's nice. I'm so happy that in this game, at least, and I don't know if there are any microtransactions. I haven't explored that. There probably is because it's EA. But within the game, there are just so many cosmetic unlocks that you get for exploring and stuff. And that feels really nice because they're fun. Like, it's fun to upgrade because you get to like completely upgrade your lightsaber. You get this little blaster. You get to completely change the coloring and upgrades of BD, all your clothing, the hairstyles. Like, there's just so much stuff that you can customize. And a lot of that is like rewarded by your exploration. Or you might get like a fucking upgrade to your health or your force or like, you know what I mean? Like, there's all sorts of stuff, perks and things. Like, there are all of these really like tangible rewards that you get that allow you to unlock stuff, or you'll find materials that you can trade with others, but then you get to decide what aspect you want, which it all feels so connected in such a rewarding and compelling way, where it doesn't feel like, it doesn't feel like some games you like enter into a room and it's like, hey, you got 5 resource. Who gives a fuck, right? Like, and like the resources is shit that like you find fucking everywhere and you're like, oh, fucking again, I don't need 5 more nails. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know how like there are games like that where you're just like, come on, which like sometimes, no, Skyrim's actually a bad example because usually it's like a cool fucking weapon. But occasionally in those games, you'll unlock a chest and you're just like, what? Cheese? You know what I mean? But that one, usually it's only an issue the more you play. But anyway, everything feels so purposeful in this. And like it's all there for a reason. And there are lots of cool enemies, and you can unlock these like pretty tough bosses really early on that you can take on if you want, or they're like, come back later and you may have a better chance. But part of you is just like, I'm gonna fucking do it now. And so it really teaches you to learn how to play it. There's a whole bunch of lightsaber stances that you can use that really vary up your attacks. It's fucking brilliant. Like, it is. I think it's my favorite Star Wars game now. I think it may have dethroned Knights of the Old Republic, which like that game is one of my favorite games of all time. But like realistically, I don't know, man. This game is really fucking good. Now, will it stand the test of time like that one does? Actually, probably better than Knights of the Old Republic, frankly. As much as I love that, it is a hard sell to some people these days. I'm like,
Well, it's all right because they've got that lost content patch coming to Switch, haven't they? So
fuck it.
there'll be a definitive version of the game to
Oh
play.
yeah, that's
There
definitely
hasn't been any
coming
news on
to
that, has there?
Switch.
No.
No, nothing. If you can't detect the sarcasm, they dropped that. Well, I don't even know if that
But they're
remake's
like,
coming
it's fine.
anymore.
You can redeem a free copy of Star Wars Episode 1 Pod Racer by way of an apology.
Which is actually a pretty good game, honestly.
I know, but
Yeah, but it's stupid. I know. But I was also like, game's actually pretty fun. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, man. I really hope Knights of the Old Republic remake, because like the Knights of the Old Republic remake could be as good as the Resident Evil ones. But I have little faith.
it could also be as
I have
bad
a
as the
bad feeling
13
with
remake.
this. Yeah, yeah, it could be. Yeah. I don't even remember. Yeah, that was bad. Anyway, all this to say, Jedi Survivor is great, better than the first game, and the first game was excellent. It leaves me in very good. Like, I really hope. I think Respawn had. I think they said they have plans for like a trilogy. I think was the plan for this one. Which
Okay.
I think I could be just talking completely out of my ass. I hope they do have plans for a trilogy, because I do think it would be nice to kind of, cap off a character's story. Though these days Star Wars is just like, let's just keep going forever. Which also I kind of love, because I've been rewatching the Clone Wars. Like, this fan did a fan edit of it called the Clone Wars Refocused, which if people haven't seen Clone Wars, you should do it, because he edited it like a sort of like more like a prestige like TV drama, and it's one of the most impressive fan edits I've ever seen in my life. It's fucking the entire Clone Wars series edited into 5 seasons of like 10 episodes each. It's incredible. Yeah, it's really, really fucking good. Anyway, that's it. That's what I'm doing. How about Rick? How about you go first this time? What are you playing?
I shall jump in. I have lots of new stuff to talk about. So I'm continuing to play FF7 Remake. I'm like at the back end of Chapter 11. A friend who's already beaten the game has reliably informed me that once you hit Chapter 12, that's where things start to pick up the pace. So my aim is to have this done before Season 2 is done. So help me God. So that's where we're at with that. I still think the game's really good. I have cooled on it ever so slightly, probably just because it's a little bit linear and it's a little bit cutscene heavy. And there's just a hint of like having to make myself play it a little bit. I'm still really, really enjoying it, but I am noticing this sort of resistance of I could be playing Radiant Historia, which I am also still chipping away on DS, or Klonoa, Moonlight Museum on the WonderSwan by way of a PSP emulating said platform, which I'm at the back end of and absolutely enjoying as a little sort of burst between other things game. Or I could be playing the first of the new games I'm playing, Nuts. This, you might remember, is a game that a friend of the podcast, Abatage, talked about when he was on previously. You play as a like graduate student helping out a scientist researching mating and hibernating patterns of nuts. And through this, you are sort of uncovering more information based on the things that the squirrels lead you towards and find. The art for this is phenomenal. It's a really sort of high contrast, 2-color palette art style. And there's this really satisfying quick loop of repositioning the cameras in the environment by day and then going back to your little motorhome and reviewing the footage by night. And particularly on a Switch, which is where I'm playing the game. It's also available on PC and via Apple Arcade on iPhone, I believe. It's really easy to sort of jump in for a night-day cycle. I found it really nice to, again, in between other things or just as a 5-minute diversion, leave the game on a night, play back the footage, find where the squirrels are going, reset my cameras, and then revisit it the next time I play. Which there's a fun sort of synchronicity between what the life of the actual in-game character would be and the way that I'm engaging with the content. But the point being, there's something very satisfying about the loop that they've got set up here. From memory, it's only a 3-hour game, according to ABBA and according to How Long to Beat. So not one that's going to eat up too much time, but feels like it's a very good time. And I'm having an absolute blast with this one so far. It's very, very peaceful, very interesting. I love the aesthetic. The visuals are really, really clean. I would love to see more games use this kind of art style. Second new game, and this is a curveball. I have set up a Virtual Boy emulator.
Interesting.
So I say set up. There's a multi-plat emulator called Mednafan, which has a bare bones but pretty robust Virtual Boy emulator. So I've started playing Jack Bros, the Lost Shin Megami Tensei tie-in. I've been playing because of the way the emulator is set up with these bad boys, a pair of red and blue 3D glasses, and in what someone on the Discord described as the authentic Virtual Boy experience. I played for 15 minutes and had to stop because I was getting a headache. Which, as someone who's played with VR headsets and been perfectly happy, there's definitely something up with that monochrome 3D setup. Now, to be clear, it works. Like, the 3D effect is somewhat effective, and you do get the sense of depth coming through it, but it's pretty hazy. And I don't think that's just my sort of janky red and blue glasses setup. I think that's just inherent in the console. And the game itself. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, you can't get any more what's the word for it? Authentic than that, because the Virtual Boy was notorious for causing nausea and headaches.
So thank God for the save states built into the emulator, because God knows I am relying quite heavily upon them. The game itself underneath is pretty bare bones. It's a twin stick shooter, which just about works because the Virtual Boy pad had 2 D-pads. There is also the option to just press one of the face buttons and you will fire in the direction that you are looking. The downside to this game is the challenge entirely comes from an arbitrary time limit. Instead of having health points that get reduced when you take damage from an enemy, that enemy attack will drain time from your timer for that level. And there are a couple of pickups periodically that will allow you to add time to your counter. I think the system sucks. There's not really a better way to say it. It discourages you from exploring, smelling the roses, doing anything other than trying to find an optimal path and just bum rush it. I also suspect that because of the time it came from, this was to stretch a game made on a shoestring budget to as long as it could possibly reasonably be. Fortunately, I have my ways around that. The core game is fine. It's nothing revolutionary, nothing groundbreaking, but it is fun to see a little sort of corner of the Shin Megami Tensei history that I would otherwise not have any access to. I am planning to at least try all of the games on the system because there are only 23. That will probably span well beyond the end of our season 2 run, but that is the plan. Jack Bros is the first on that list. I will be bit by bit chipping away at that as we go through. 2 more games I'm currently playing. The first is a PC game called The Multimedium. This is a 2D level-based platformer, puzzle platformer. The conceit being you are a character who is traveling between dimensions. Each dimension is painted in a different art style, whether that's charcoal, watercolor, pencil, woodblock. I've made a few of those up, but the watercolor and the charcoal are definitely in there. The difficulty with this game is that you can tell it was made by an artist who fancied their hand at game dev because the game portion of it is pretty thin. Fine, controls well enough, isn't completely dull, but is very, very stripped back. I'm talking a jump and a grab, and that's it. Now, to their credit, there have been a few different systems, a degree of novelty, and a degree of challenge with very, very generous checkpointing. However, this is a 2-hour game and I'm 25 minutes in and I'm already a little bit bored. So that doesn't bode particularly well. I'll finish this one because, again, like Klonoa, it's shortish levels. It's a nice one to jump into as a palate cleanser between other things. But it's not rocking my world. It's not particularly moving the needle. I'm enjoying the art, but that only works up to a point in an experience like this, and it doesn't make up for the lack of compelling gameplay. I have to caveat, I think if you're someone who doesn't play a lot of platformers, someone who doesn't play a lot of games, this is the kind of thing that would blow your socks off, and you wouldn't necessarily have the context to be disappointed by it in the ways that I am particularly. But also, this is an indie game. If you're playing this, you've played other video games. So it's a bit of a catch-22 on this one. I expect I'll have this finished for next week. I'll probably talk a bit more about the ins and outs of it then. And the final game, and this is a doozy. Do either of you remember the 2005 movie adaptation of C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe?
You know, sort of
I
topical
read
that
all
you're
the
playing
books
this.
and I watched the movie too.
The books were great.
Kind of topical that you're playing this, actually, because Greta Gerwig just got announced. She's making 2 Narnia books, Narnia movies. Netflix just paid her to write and direct 2 books in the Narnia. Like, I don't know particularly which ones, but she's doing 2 of them.
That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The conceit with the Narnia books is like it's a 7-book series.
Yeah, I think she's being contracted to
Oh.
start with. Do you know what I mean?
Netflix being Netflix, yeah, fair enough.
It's like they're
And
not going to
with
be
the
like, let's do 7.
And with the movies, the third one critically underperformed, so we never got the final film in the quadrilogy
Yeah,
of the one starring the Fancy Children, which was slightly heartbreaking.
yeah,
But anyway,
Wait, there are 3 of them?
yeah.
out?
There's the Caspian, Prince Caspian or whatever.
and
Yeah,
then that one did
yeah.
reasonably well, and then they released Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and that one did not do well at all. Oh no, it did not.
Oh, that one flew under my radar.
Well,
like-
exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Exactly.
hard because like Narnia is like, listen, I love those books, but like Lewis lent fucking hard into the Christian allegory, you know? Like it's an untransparent allegory, which is also weird that America hasn't jumped on that harder. But anyway, it's just like I feel like making those ones sometimes some of it is it's more challenging to get it to do well, essentially.
You have to Dawn Treader carefully.
Yeah, you sure do.
The point being, the PS2 movie tie-in game of this is a game that I played a fair bit as a child and never finished. Having Googled it since, it turns out I got to either the penultimate or the ultimate level when we gave up or moved on to other things or stopped for whatever reason. And about a week ago, we were in our local used game shop and I saw this game for 50 pence. That's like 40 cents. It's nothing.
Yeah.
You couldn't even buy a Coca-Cola for that kind of money. So obviously I bought it. And this game has 2-player co-op. So I'm playing it with my girlfriend. I'm reliving my childhood. She's being made to experience a nearly 20-year-old movie tie-in video game. But it does kind of hold up-ish. So it's a character action game. It's third person. The camera's not in your control and it's also not great, but it, for the most part, is serviceable. And the game centers around team-up attacks. So one of the boys might grab the youngest sister and like swing her down like a bowling ball across the floor to break ice shards. Or
what the fuck?
no, genuinely, the older brother might grab the younger brother and swing him around in like an axe throw sort of attack. There's various team up moves. You unlock more with collectibles that you pick up through the game. It's very, very linear. It's relatively basic. The older sister, Susan, has the ranged attacks and also the pan pipes, which let you like cast some certain spells at preset locations to do various things. So she's kind of OP. But every character has a justification, and they've kind of spread the skills across them all relatively evenly. Not so much Edmund for plot reasons, but across the 4 of them, they've all got justifications for what they're doing. They're all utilized within the story. The game is spread over 15 chapters. We have played 7 of them. It's worth saying, of those chapters, one of them was a boss battle. The first two of them were quasi-tutorial levels running around the old Victorian mansion that houses the wardrobe that leads into Narnia. And it's not a long game. There's how long to beat has it? It's sort of 4.5 hours. But it's holding up remarkably well. I did feel like picking the game up, it was going to go one of two ways. Either my childhood would remain intact, if not maybe slightly bolstered, and we'd have a good time. Fortunately, that's where we've ended up. Or it could have ended up as a total disaster, and I could have just ruined like the pleasant memories I had of that game. And that's sort of foreshadowing for when we get to the topic. One other thing I will mention, modern TV tech has not been kind to the PS2.
Sure
Like,
shit hasn't.
At all. And it's worth saying I'm not doing it any favors because I'm using a cheap as shit PS2 to HDMI adapter. But the JYDGEs are real. There's loads of aliasing. There's lots of little artifacts. There's things that probably weren't as blurry on a CRT as they are on a modern flat panel TV. But that doesn't detract too much from the experience. And I have to say, on the whole, I have very much enjoyed what we've played of the first half of the game, which is the main thing. And again, this is one I expect we'll have finished very, very soon. So I'll look forward to talking more about it and some of the stuff that comes up towards the back end of the game as we go on. So that's it for me. That's everything that I am currently playing. I'm always playing Marvel Snap, but I mean, that doesn't count. Paula, why don't you tell us about your two?
Well, so I'm still playing Pokemon Emerald, and we lost. No, we're fine. We're fine. I'm still playing Pokemon Emerald, and I went through quite an adventure. Not gonna lie. Like I have to go to Team Magma Hideout and then Team Aqua Hideout. And when I was at Magma Hideout, it Groudon escaped, so I'm at that part of the story right now. But you can't just go and follow the oversized fire ground lizard, like right at this point of the story. So I had to go do other story things. And while I was at Aqua Hideout, got an evolve into Altaria. Yay! So that's one more fully evolved Pokemon in the team that is actually pulling their weight right now, because God knows that Phoebus is not doing a lot right now. I also went to Mustip City, and I went to the Mustip City gym and took on actually two gym leaders in the city, which are Tati and Lisa. Like, one thing that I've really noticed while revisiting Emerald compared to other games is the amount of double battles that are on the story, because well, some of them are optional because you have like trainers that are like walking around and doing their own thing, and then they suddenly just happen to look at you at the same time, and then you have to battle both of them at the same time. But a lot of them are like scripted double battles, which is kind of nice. Like, I kind of miss that in the newer Pokemon games. That is neither here nor there, because I got the main badge. I think that's 7 out of 8, if I remember correctly. Well, then once I battled the gym leaders, of course, Team Magma went and caused trouble on Mustip City, and they were trying to like steal the fuel of the rocket to pretty much blow up a volcano. Like, I didn't remember this specific part, but they were very much going to blow up the volcano and pretty much the entire region with it. Not pretty. Anyway, I managed to take them out of it, and they were like, maybe causing mass destruction in this land isn't the best idea ever. So they are now in my set to stop Team Aqua. After that, I went navigating and Lemonade, my Trapinch, evolved into Vibrava. So now I have an actual dragon type. Well, Altaria is dragon type, but it is weird because it is a bird. Anyway, I got another dragon type in my team. Right now, if you throw like an icicle to my team, it explodes. Like half of it is quadruple weak to ice, I think. And I made it to Pacific Lockdown with very tired Pokemon, it says in my notes, because the distance between Mossdeep and Pacific Log is actually kind of like large. There's a lot of water in this region. And sorry, my mind went to the too much water review, but anyway, now I'm currently trying to collect the berries I need for the Fibas evolution, which, by the way, I thought I had like a lot of berries like kind of like saved up, like taking just space in the different like berry spots. But for some strange reason, instead of like regrowing after a certain time, they just disappeared. So I had to farm a lot of berries, and I had to check on them like a couple of times a day to just ensure that I'm not losing any berries. I also went to New Mobile, which is kind of like a town next to Mobile City, and there were like a lot of electros there disguised as Pokeballs. That brings back memories. And yeah, I've been very farming and very collecting in Pokemon Emerald. Oh, and at some point I was thinking, hey, I still don't have like a proper team member that knows cat. I only have the Ninkada, which name I forgot already. But it just I want an actual member of the team that actually does things. So I went and caught Piña Colada the Lotad, and then realized it can't learn cat. So, like any of its evolutions, and it is a grass type. In my times in Pokemon Red and Blue, every grass type was able, or pretty much every grass type was able to learn cat. Why can't Lotad learn cat? Anyway, that made me mad. So, okay, I can't have a Piña Colada in my party, so I went to try to find a Seedot and realized it is even rarer than Ralts. So I said no to that, and finally settled down on a Shroomish. So I caught Truffle the Shroomish, and even though it has to evolve so it can learn cat, it is good enough for me. So now I have an extra weakness to flying, I think. So I need to start teaching my Pokemon either Ice Beam or Thunderbolt, which I have the TM for, but I don't know who I want to teach it to. And this is pretty much my adventures on Pokemon Emerald. So to recap, my team right now is is formed by Mango the Swampert, Lemonade the Pibrava, Marina the Fivas, Cotton the Altaria, Naraka the Gardevoir, and Truffle the Shroomish. Now, the other game that I've been playing is Hatoful Boyfriend. I actually just played a route of it, but there was like so much stuff that I didn't remember from this game that kind of caught me off guard. So again, you have this school for birds because birds are sentient now, and the protagonist, a mere human, is allowed to go to a bird school. And the school is called Pigeon Nations Institute. By the way, it's the school for the world's most gifted birds, according to the description. And you have like a bunch of them, like I already described, like the childhood friend, the soporific math professor, the transfer student. There's a morning dove at the library for some reason. And you have a transfer student, which is an asshole, and I don't like him. And there's also Chu, that is this school doctor that I'm only doing his route because completionist. Otherwise, I wouldn't. And I need to with his route to unlock the final one. One thing that I didn't remember is that not only the protagonist lives alone in a cave, she's also a hunter-gatherer. So to survive, she has to actively hunt her food or gather herbs and make food. Which it's what kind of world is this? And also, there was a very interesting comment from the childhood friend. Was you're pretty much like at the end of the route, and he drops the line with we birds weren't supposed to come this far. So why did birds come this far? How did they conquer the world? There's a lot of stuff that, even though this route in particular, the childhood friend route, doesn't really solve like anything. It does give it does kind of like plant a few questions that kind of like make you curious to know more. So yeah, that is Hatoful Boyfriend. I hope to finish it like this week, hopefully. Hatofully, I don't know. And yeah, that landed flat and it's sad. So let's go to the topic of the week. Rick, where are we
This is what happens when you wing it.
Oh. Oh, to both of you.
So, inspired by my venturing back into my childhood stroke Narnia, we thought this week we'd talk about revisiting games from our childhood. When we do it, how we do it, the pros and the cons. And I suppose the first thing with that is what games we do and don't choose to revisit, because there'll be huge swathes of the games that we played when we were little that for one reason or another we won't play again. And for me, I think it's predominantly games where I want to experience that world, those environments again, particularly the ones that bear replaying more. So I've played through the Ratchet and Clank original trilogy a couple of times, and I think they speak to both that and also when you have, the opportunity to do so in a different context. So in that instance, on Vita, as part of the HD trilogy, with Narnia, that different context is I'm playing with a different person on a big, massive TV, as opposed to a little CRT in the back of the living room, which is where I played it with my brother the first time. And I think that probably speaks to when you and I replayed Super Mario Land 2 on the GBA also, because that was in the context of having that game in full color. What about you guys? What prompts you to revisit an old game?
Well, sometimes you just want to go back to simple times. And also, it's just like morbid curiosity of, hey, I remember I liked this game as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Was it really good? Like, was it really fun? Or was it just the novelty of it that made me like it? One of such examples that I actually wanted to go back to revisit, mainly because I never like fully completed it as a kid, was like I completed the quote unquote main story, but I wanted to do more of it. And that is Pokemon Stadium. So I did have a Nintendo 64 growing up, but it was mostly locked in a little box because I had to study for school and be a good girl. And my brother and sisters were already like on university because age gap. But the thing is that I did remember it fondly because of how the Pokemon animators were. And at the time, it was like, hey, I can play all these mini games and I'm the Pokemon. And some of my favorite mini games that have to be like the Lickitung mini game because I was like one of the few kids who actually kind of like understood how the the mini game worked. So I won all the time. But also, I don't know, it's it spoke to Lil me in the sense of trying to min max um everything on that mini game because you have to try to eat the more expensive food in the least amount of time. But anyway, um the thing is that I never actually completed like the Hall of Fame, I'm gonna call it, where you have to do a certain part of the game, like be the lead four, I think, and the champion with every single
Mm.
Pokemon in the Pokédex. The thing is,
Jesus
a lot
fucking
of the
Christ.
rental Pokemon moves suck.
Yeah.
So I actually tried to. I got an original copy of Pokemon Blue and tried to train Pokemon for this thing, pretty much. And maybe like training Pokemon like with good moves and good IVs back in the day was so fucking hard. So my dreams were shattered. I think there's a way to actually do it with just rental Pokemon. But I at some point went to Vita Lead 4 with whatever my team of 6 ends up being on Pokemon Blue. That is one of my most nostalgic games. I have more, but any of you want to
Yeah.
talk about your
I
nostalgic
mean, I'll jump
games
in.
too?
I think so not to get too serious on this, but like I have or philosophical, but like so I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, and if not, well, here we go. So like I have what's called like dysthymia, right? Which I don't know if any of you know what that. You heard of this before, dysthymia? Yeah. Okay. So this is one of what we would call like the medical diagnosis for much of. It's not quite depression. Like put it this way, dysthymia is the consistent low mood, right? So think of it like when you feel it's actually you can use it as like an adjective or verb to feel dysthymic, right? Which is when you feel very like baseline low. Think of it like your emotions. You don't feel emotionally high or emotionally low. You're at this sort of monotony, right? This middle ground.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can imagine dysthymia can often turn into severe depressions, right? Because you're already at a very low state. So to get pushed further down is not that hard. So I've had this since I was probably the doctors aren't entirely sure, but they think probably around puberty is where it likely hit in. That's where a lot of sort of depressions and things hit for a lot of individuals, right? Your body goes through a lot of changes at the time. So does your brain chemistry and all that. To preface this, I am great right now. I have lots of therapy. I've got medication that works extremely well. I no longer experience that dysthymia. I do occasionally. There are some days where I'll feel dysthymic, but I know how to handle it now. You know what I mean? But one of the things is that with dysthymia, I went through many, many years of severe depressions, right? Really up until I would say my mid 20s. I would go through cycles of severe depressions. And when I wasn't in severe depression, I was dysthymic. And one of the issues with depression in general and with dysthymia is that it blocks your memory creation, your ability to really store and create memories. Because a lot of how memory works, right? We talk about memory in terms of there's things like sense memory, right? Like I'm sure you've all experienced the like when you smell something or you hear something or you touch this and like you get this feeling, right? Or when you return back someplace, you get this like sort of wash of memories that come back, right? Because it's kind of like you're in that area. There's also many memories are created based on strong emotions. It's part of the reasons why we can remember all the shitty things that we've done, right? Because we might have a very strong visceral reaction of embarrassment or sadness or something, right? That could be a really strong feeling. It's also why you can often remember very happy moments, right? But just simple happy moments are kind of tough to remember. Some people are way better than others at this. My memory is extremely bad. My parents tend to not understand this, but like they will talk to me about something and I go, listen, I have literally zero memory of this thing that you were describing, right? Like I just don't have really any memories from like childhood to my mid, to be honest, childhood until like teenage years is kind of a complete wash for me. I have selective memories, but I don't actually know if those are memories that I have or things that I've been told have happened. This is what's challenging, right? Yeah, you know what I mean? So I think I have memories of those, but I'm not really sure. I even have I'll be honest, I have a difficulty remembering even things within high school. Actually, high school is, I can barely remember. And same with like, going even into my university years, my memory is very, very shot on those years. Better than because I was starting to get help. So around the time when I started to get help and I started to get medication is when my memories start to click in better. And so I can remember more from sort of my early 20s onward. So that's like a little bit of a sort of explanation thing for you on just that, because this all wraps into video games are a thing that I have strong sense memories for, and strong feelings about. Not so much video games from when I was particularly in that deep sort of depressive area. I some of them a little bit, like DS I can get some memories of, but I don't really have like deeply strong, pleasurable memories of them. But Game Boy, right? Game Boy. That shit was when I was a kid. And that shit, when I play that, unlocks some, like, I straight up get like not necessarily memories, but I get feeling memories, right? I remember the emotional states that I experienced when I was that young. And those states are pretty fucking great, They're pretty awesome. It's like part of that of nostalgia to me is less I actually don't I don't feel nostalgic for a simpler time. I feel nostalgic for that extreme emotion. Because I think some of you could probably agree with this. As we get a little bit older, I think our intensity of emotion gets a little bit dulled. Now, I've been fortunate that I'm getting to a point in my life where I can start to feel that excitement again. But the unbridled enthusiasm of childhood, it's pretty special and it's pretty hard to get back, right? Because, you're just a little more realistic now, right? Like, that this thing you bought is fun for you, but it's also not like, I'm gonna play more shit. You know what I mean? Whereas that Game Boy game you had, that's the shit, man. That's the only thing, right? Like, this is the fucking thing, and this is all I have. And it's like, it's so intense, and it like really pulls you up. And so for me, games that I often revisit are games that have that I have this innate sort of strong reaction to already, that I know I experienced a real sense of wonder when I was young doing that. Or even frustration. Ghost and Goblins. That's a game I go back to many times. That game drove me crazy as a kid. So fucking hard. And I was playing the worst possible version on the Game Boy Color. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the screen was so tiny, I couldn't fucking see anyone. But that game, such strong emotions to it. I get a little I get a little emotional thinking about playing that game now because I can remember that feeling. And maybe I don't actually, because again, memories are weird, right? I think we've talked about this on the podcast. Sorry, thank you for my TED Talk, but we've talked about how every memory that you possess, every time you remember it, you are forgetting it, right? Because you are recreating it in your mind and you're creating new neural links. And so the more you remember a thing, the less you actually remember said thing. It's kind of sad, but it's also kind of interesting and special because it's how we create memories, right? It's like, that's why sometimes, you'll talk to a friend and be like, yeah, remember this thing? And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is how it happened. And you're like, oh, you might have that moment, right?
It's kind of like when you have like an old notebook on a drawer and you take it out and it gets damaged a little bit, like every time you take it out to read it.
Sort of. I mean, it's even more insidious than that. It's like, think of it more like this. It's like if you had an old notebook and every time you wanted to read it, you had to rewrite the entire notebook.
Damn.
That's what it is, right? And you essentialize it more and more and more and more as you go along to the point where it does not even resemble what actually occurred. It resembles what you think occurred. Human life, it's a fleeting thing, right? So anyway, and then you conflate it with other things that have happened, and also time is fucked up, right? Because the older we get, the more time compresses, and it's a whole thing. But all of this to say, and not to get metaphysical, I think games are really special in that sense because, unlike, say, a film, wherein you just sit down and watch maybe something from your childhood, right? That's a very passive experience. That sometimes I feel like it kind of connects me at times, but usually I'm just like, here it is from the start. But with games, because you have to interact with it so much, to me, it actually, I feel like it has more opportunities to remind me of what it was like, because I have to actively engage with said thing. So by doing that active engagement, it's like my brain's already, working harder anyway. And you're right. Sometimes you can have times where you're like, shit, it's kind of fucking sucks. But that doesn't even it doesn't even bother me that much for some reason. Like even when the game isn't very good, I still remember it, right? I still get the memory of it. And it's like, yeah, sure, it fucking sucks, but I have a special into this thing because I got to experience it. It's like people who grew up, say, on Sonic versus Super Mario, right? They have a special in with Sonic. They can love it, which, actually, I'm so sorry to all those Sonic fans. I think they've been disappointed more than we have. But you know what I mean, right? Like if you were sort of brought up on something, you have an into that thing. I did it with the Third Age. Remember I played that like it was last summer. Lord of the Rings, the Third Age one, the RPG Lord of the Rings one, right? I came back to that from my childhood. Yeah, I came back to that from my childhood, and I got to beat it this time. So not only was it a fun reminder of my childhood, but I also got to actually see it through for the first time. So yeah, anyway, that's a whole lot of stuff, but yeah, this is my experience with childhood games.
Well, another childhood game for me would be Ocarina of Time, even though it's not my favorite Zelda, because of how I had to pretty much either play on a game, like a game save for my brother or sisters, because we were 4, and that cartridge only has 3 slots, so I was fucked. So once they left the house, I was able to finally play the game. The problem is there was an issue with the game, not with the game, with the console, where after a certain amount of time, it just turns off, and it could be like half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour tops, and I had to pretty much learn by heart the entire section of the game before you get the Master Sword, which is the 3 temples. So I was speed running that game. I don't know how I did like the 3 temples, like not the 3 temples, the 3 dungeons in an hour before the game shuts off. And I was always at like starting the Shadow Temple or trying to get to the Shadow Temple. Not the Shadow Temple, I forgot the name of it, the Forest Temple. And now that I think about it, Stephen me never save, because I could just save the game. I could just have saved the game and didn't have to replay the game all over again each time. I was dumb.
It happens. We've all been there.
I just had the moment of realization where it was like, hey, I was just a dumb kid. Anyway, so the fun part of it is that I know that first section of the game by heart by now. So each time I play the game, I just get all the secrets, get all the things in that section of the game, and then go to the actual Temple of Time and get the sword. But it is impressive how muscle memory works, because I could just not remember anything until I pick up the controller, and then everything makes sense. And by the way, I fixed it in Nintendo 64. It was actually a problem with the AC adapter, which was easily replaceable.
Oh, that's always good
nice
news when it's not the fucking console.
No, it was just the AC adapter was kind of like roasted. But the only game that is weirdly nostalgic for me, because it was technically my first PC game, was Warcraft 3. The Reign of Chaos and the Frozen Throne was the first game with a more fleshed out story that I played. So I remember it fondly, and I spent way too many hours on multiplayer. I saw the birth of Dota and League of Legends. It was wild. Those were wild times. I want to revisit that game, because I did revisit it like a little while ago, but I haven't redone the campaign without the cheat code, so I want to do that. yeah, I want to do that. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say. Sorry.
No, one thing I do want to jump on, and I know I mentioned it briefly before, is like the hoops that potentially needed to be jumped through to make these games work nicely. Revisiting them now, not so much handhelds, because generally speaking, you have the same screen on those, and as long as the battery still works in it, it's fine. If it doesn't, it's probably old enough that it's very easily emulated. But I'm talking like PS1, PS2, those eras of consoles, and PS3. Excuse me, PS3 to a lesser extent. The hoops you potentially need to get through to get those games running nicely, and in a way vaguely that you remember. And even, once you've done all of that, there are some, purists of one kind or another who spend ungodly amounts of money on adapters and little pieces of kit that upscale the image and pass it through and filter it and do whatever needs to be done to it. Yeah. And then are there any games that you guys have actively avoided replaying from your childhood?
Vex.
Because when I was going, Vex is a shout for sure. The one that jumped out to me was the 2004 Transformers game for PS2, which at the time, phenomenal. I just know that game won't stand up if I play it again, because there was so much it was doing that was pushing the boundaries at the time in a way that probably marked it out in its day, but would conversely date it going back to it today. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll bite the bullet and boot it up again, and we'll find out. But that's my suspicion.
Yeah, I mean, Vex is the one that I think of the most, because it's like those like Super Mario, it's like all those like platformer like collectathon games, and I loved it as a kid, but that's also because I hadn't played any of them, and so I'm sure if I go back and play it now, I have a really fucking bad time. I'm just like, no thanks.
The story behind that game is actually quite sad. Like,
really? Oh no.
Yeah, so Matt McMuscles did a What Happened on it, and relatively recent actually. It was in April, and there's a lot of stuff that at the 11th hour had to be trimmed back to make the game launch, basically. So I've shared a link in the Discord. If we remember, we'll put one in the show notes. If we don't, it's easily found. I just put What Happened Vex into DuckDuckGo, and it was the second link that came up. So, yeah. What about you, Paula? Any that you actively avoid?
In my case, not really, because I didn't have like a lot of opportunities to play as a kid. Besides, mainly because the Nintendo 64 was locked up somewhere in my parents' room, and I got to use the PC for a limited time each day when I was a little bit more grown up. But I didn't have like any particular game that I would hate to go back to.
No.
Maybe because I don't know how I convinced my parents to get me a subscription for WoW. But I think that's one I wouldn't want to go back to, mainly because MMOs are such a time sink. And even though I do remember like going back at some point with my boyfriend to World of Warcraft, I don't remember which expansion are we, because there's so many at this point. But anyway, but the thing is that I don't think I like the Warcraft universe, but I'm not cut out for MMOs like WoW. And there was another one that isn't like really from my childhood, because I was already at uni, but that was like 7 years ago. League of Legends. Never play that shit again. Like, it is the most toxic hellhole I ever been. Like, if you think your League of Legends communities are toxic, wait until you see the Latin America one. No, that's horrible.
I have to say,
I'm saying
I think
nothing. I do not want to incur their wrath. They don't.
I think for slightly different reasons, I'm in the same boat. A lot of my replays are sort of late primary school going into early high school time. I think looking back, other than Super Mario Land, which is timeless in its own right, the oldest game that I've properly gone back and replayed is Astro Boy on the Game Boy Advance, which, oh my God, what a game. Absolutely replayable. But then there's like Hotline Miami. I've played both of those a few times. The Wolf Among Us, I played again several years after.
Yeah, I replayed
Hector, Badge of Carnage, sorry.
I said I replayed Mass Effect many times.
Yes, yeah, and recently, again, going back to in a new context, there was that Legendary Edition that had the trilogy and prettified them up and touched them up, absolutely. The Hector games that started on iOS and then got a Steam port, I've played them once. I've reinstalled them as we've been talking because I might play them again. Are there any more we want to jump on particularly before we maybe wrap this up?
No, I don't know. I feel like Paula, sure, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a big help there.
Yeah, something that is more like, it's not like I'm gonna revisit it because there's more complete iterations of it. But oh my God, I played the hell out of the original Smash Bros. Game. And when I loaded up Smash Bros. Ultimate, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and I saw the original 8 characters just there, and you had to unlock all the rest, that was glorious for me. That is all I have to say. Sorry.
No, that's fine. The N64 was a huge thing in my college dorm. Like, I had one, and that N64 got so much play. Like, I don't know what it is, but like, because we weren't even like, we were sort of like my age range was sort of tail end of the N64, so we had some memories of it, but not as many as some of the older kids. But man, we all just like Mario Party on the N64. Fuck yeah, Smash. Fucking that was the party console, man. Like Mario Kart, like Diddy Kong, right? All those fucking games, we played them so much. Nice, that's great. Yeah, well, why don't you tell us why do you visit childhood games, and why do you revisit childhood games? Okay. And now it's time for How Long to Beat the Game. Yeah. Shit, is it my turn? Or is it Paula's?
No,
Paula's
it's
turn.
Paula's
Paula's
turn.
turn. Yeah,
It
good,
is your
not
turn.
me.
Yeah.
Right, you two last week, right? Because it's currently the standings are Rick at 20, Paula at 18, and me at 17. So we're pretty close overall.
All to play for.
Yeah, still lots of. Oh, I'm definitely gonna watch that. What happened after though? To Rick, that's a good one.
I'm trying to not get one that is just like at the same time all over, because that isn't.
Well, good hint.
Oh,
I mean, it could be.
Yeah.
Could be curveball.
Who knows?
okay. How about Mr. President?
I beg your pardon.
Mr. President.
Mr.
The
President.
game is called Mr. President.
Now, is this?
Yeah.
Whenever I hear Mr. President, all I think of is something. Anyway, let's see here. Mr. President. The fuck? Is that Trump on this? You play as
Yeah,
Dick Rockhard Johnson, bulletproof man, the best bodyguard money can buy. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
What on earth have you brought us to, Paula?
Yeah, what is this?
Okay, so for the bonus question, I'm gonna ask, what is the there's a tie there. What are the how do I say it? The game has scored like a 5.7 out of 10. So I need you to tell. Okay, so I need you. The game has scored a 5.7 out of 10. So I need you to tell me which is the lowest rated score, like which score out of the entire 10 segment has the least amount of people voting on it.
Oh, I see. Okay. The least voted for score on the thing. Okay.
Yeah, the least voted for score.
This looks
Thank
like
you. I
YouTube
knew you
debate.
would understand me, Alex.
Yeah. No. I got you.
Oh, this game looks shit.
Yeah, it looks like
It is.
it looks like bait for
I mean, I think you're probably right.
you know what I mean? Yeah, like it looks like something that they made to like get yeah.
Oh, guess which friend of the podcast owns this game?
Who?
I'm going to call him out publicly. Uwe owns a copy of Mr. President.
Fucking course he does.
Despicable.
Okay, I think I have a pulse on this game, to be honest.
I'm just putting my times in now. And so, just to be clear on the
Yeah, I think I know this one.
on the bonus question, you want us to tell you which score out of 10 has received the lowest awards
Amount
for
of
this game?
votes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The one closest to the actual score will get the point, I guess.
Okay, my stuff's in. I
Yeah,
don't feel
I'm
great
in.
about it, but it's there.
I feel pretty good about this one. I think.
Okay,
It's a shitpost game.
so for main, you both said 2 hours.
Of course.
So you both get the point, but yeah, it is
Nice.
2 hours now.
Oh, perfect.
Alex said for main plus 2 hours and a half, and Rick says 3 hours. That half an hour gets him the point. Alex is the winner on this round.
Nice.
The game is 2 hours and 30 minutes long on main plus.
I had a feeling. I had a strong feeling.
And then you both went and said 100% is 4 hours. You both get the point, but you're both spot on.
Hey.
And
God damn, that's the
this
worst.
one I have to check because I forgot. For the less voted rating, I guess, out of 10, Alex said 4 out of 10, and Rick said 6 out of 10. And the winner is Alex, because
Hey!
the lowest voted rating for this game is 4 out of 10.
Hey,
With
fuck yeah.
2 votes. Then it goes 8. Someone voted 8 on this one. 3 people voted this as an 8 out of 10.
Yikes.
That's crazy. There's no way this
Yikes.
is an 8
One
out
of
of
them
10
was,
game.
yeah, I know it, cretin.
Well, that puts the points at me and Rick are tied with 22 now, and Paula's at 18, which Paula could easily come back up to the top in the next round because it'll be Rick.
Tasty.
Well, this is a pretty close one. Who knows where we'll end up
And
at the end?
before we wind it up, if you would like to experience Mr. President for yourself, if you'd like to try and take a bullet for the soon-to-be president as Dick Rockhard Johnson, you can experience this game at 75% off in the current Steam sale.
Still probably
My
What
God.
a deal.
worth. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to this week's episode. We'll see you next week. The countdown is on. There's 4 more episodes left in this season before a new voice enters the domain of the podcast. Until then, toodles.
Bye.